Hey everybody, this is Twamp, and I exist in a realm of irony between I own an unopened version of this game and a calendar of awkward family photos. Anyhow, what is an RPG? That's a very dumb question to ask out loud, but it's harder to answer than you might think. Now, yes, an RPG stands for a role-playing game, but what makes a game a role-playing game? The two definitions that I found that were most appropriate was, a role-playing game is a genre of game where the player controls a fictional character or characters to undertake a quest in an imaginary world. Another very similar definition is a role-playing game, commonly referred to as a role-playing game, an RPG, or a CRPG if it's on the computer, is a video game genre where that player controls the actions of a character and is immersed in a well-defined world. Both of these definitions sound correct. Any game from Mario to Batman Arkham to Call of Duty to even Professor Layton could be considered a role-playing game. You take a well-defined character and you have a well-defined world. But that doesn't line up with what we consider an RPG in today's standard. There's a clear-cut difference between a game like Final Fantasy and Mario. So I did some digging on this topic to find out what is the criteria a game needs to meet to become an RPG. Dungeons and Dragons. To many, it was considered the first RPG. The first popular RPG, I should say. Dungeons & Dragons, or D&D, is a tabletop role-playing game originally designed by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. It was first published in 1974 by Tactical Studies Rules Incorporated. Most of the modern RPG tropes and hallmarks find their roots within this game. From D&D, we find the criteria that we use to determine if a game is an RPG, and they are as follows: levels, gear, loot, story, stats. Yes, that was like my fourth take on that. Let's break these down. First, we'll start with levels. Your player wants to feel like they are actually growing, like their character is becoming more powerful based on their travels. Having experience points in an RPG is an important aspect because it shows that your player is getting better at the game, their character is growing, they're becoming their own person. There have to be abilities, and this is where classes come from. Classes are important because it determines what a character can do. This allows you to have a lot of variety in your gameplay. One run you can go through as the wizard, the next run you can go through as the rogue or the fighter or whatever the fuck you're basing this off of. And that's why classes and level is important. This, however, becomes a slight problem because sometimes you just get straight capped by an enemy that counters your entire theme. As you grow as a character, your stats increase, what determines how good your character is. In most good RPGs, you have a boon and you have a flaw. Your boon is what your character excels in. Maybe my fighter is very strong, but he's very slow. Stats determine what your character can do and can't do, but it also determines what your opponents can and can't do. In a one-on-one fight, you can exploit your enemy's stat weaknesses in order to gain an advantage. So you're constantly trying to make sure that your team composition works. This is great in turn-based combat and in tactical combat. As I said earlier, however, you can get level capped because your stats are not good enough to vary up to enemy stats. And that's why gear was created. Gear actually makes it possible to go questing against enemies that you do not have a winning strategy against. You have a enemy type that is really strong, it can tank physical hits really well, but it's weak to, let's say, an element like light or lightning or fire. Plus, when you're going throughout the game, you find better gear. Finding better gear means you have a reason to actually explore the world that you exist in. The third criteria is story. And the final thing that we talk about is loot. This is important. You need a reason for your characters to actually go off and do things. So now that we've gone through the criteria, we should be able to pick apart any RPG and say, yeah, that's an RPG, right? Wrong. There are different types of RPGs that exist because hybridizing a genre just is fun, I guess. The first RPG game released on a computer was called Rogue Exploring the Dark Dungeon in 1980, which was a text-based dungeon crawling game. There was loot, there was some semblance of levels, and there was some semblance of plot. The original Legend of Zelda was released. It was called an RPG. So what we considered an RPG has changed. There are 4 types of RPGs that are accepted in today's society. These are the, oh fuck. These are the, I'm caught on my coattail, fuck. There are 4 types of RPGs that are commonly accepted today, and they are as follows: Adventure RPG, Strategy RPG, MMORPG, and Action RPG. Adventure RPG that is clear cut is any JRPG. The stories are normally very linear. Side quests are important in order to level your characters, and grinding kind of becomes a thing. If you can min-max a character, you're probably playing a JRPG or an adventuring RPG. The first examples of this type of RPG are as follows: Hytale from 1984, Dragon Slayer from 1984, Dragon Quest from 1986, and the legendary Final Fantasy from 1987. These are the front runners of the adventure RPG genre. But the best examples of that genre are Persona 5 and Bravely Default. Bravely Default is refined JRPG goodness to a T. Persona 5, the most stylized non-RPG RPG that exists. Now, this is the most accepted RPG form. However, the equally as popular RPG form is the tactical RPG. Now, what the tactical RPG differs from a normal J or adventuring RPG is the fact that there is a grid that exists. You have cover, terrain bonuses, you have the ability to gang up on one target, you have the ability to actually move around the map and avoid conflict. Now, with tactical RPGs, normally you have a group of characters to pull from and move around a map. Normally there is a permadeath system placed in these games. When a character dies, they're normally dead. Early examples of the tactical RPG genre are as follows: Tunnels of Doom from 1982, The Dragon and the Princess from 1982, Ultima 3 Exodus from 1983, and Bokuska Wars from 1983. But the pinnacle example of these genres are Banner Saga, XCOM 2, and Fire Emblem are the most well-known ones today. These first 2 genres are very easy to pick apart. The elements are very blatant and in your face, and we can accept these. The next 2 genres are not like that. MMORPGs. Now, these are harder to pin down. What this pulls from D&D, besides the stats and such, is that feeling of sitting down and playing with people. Because the game is an online experience, the game technically doesn't ever have to end. It should be an ever-growing format. That's why developers have to add new content in order to entice people to play it more, which should grow out the community to then need to have more stuff in there. In order to play them, you need lots of people, and easy enough that new people that come into that expansion can play it. And as a player, at a certain point, you should get level capped because the game is designed for multiple people to fight given enemies and bosses. That's why raids are a really big deal. It's sad to say, if you don't have friends, don't get those games. In today's day and age, in 2019, it is much easier to get a group of people to play the game with you. The first fully graphic multi-user RPG was Neverwinter Nights, developed in 1991. The first mainstream MMORPG was EverQuest, made in 1999. The most well-known MMORPG, however, is World of Warcraft. Now, the game to get more people into the genre than any other game so far has been Destiny. Destiny merged the shooter community with the MMORPG community. Now, there are also real-time RPGs, your FIFA, your Madden, your the baseball one that no one plays. These are all technically RPGs. I think that MMORPGs are muddled and hard to talk about. but they are much easier compared to that of an action RPG. But action RPGs are harder to talk about because they wear the cloak of another genre so well that it's hard to determine if it is or isn't an RPG. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is not an action RPG. A game like Assassin's Creed is not an action RPG. A game like Shadow of Mordor is an action RPG. Well, you need the elements from earlier, the 5 criteria, but it is the real-time combat. In an action RPG, if you're good enough, if you're skilled enough, if you're a true gamer, you should be able to beat these games. If you're skilled enough in the game, you can overcome really dumb enemies. This type of game blends very well with the hack and slash, the shooter, and the action adventure genre. The following examples are all action RPG games that people know about today. Almost impossible to not know about because it's on so many platforms, and that is Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. It is not a good example of an action RPG. The 4 best examples I have for the action RPG are as follows. Mass Effect 2, the best third-person shooter action RPG game ever created. Immersive story, solid leveling system, classes, pretty good gameplay. Dark Souls 3 is more refined. It is a much better game to play in terms of what an action RPG is. Yes, Dark Souls 1 takes more skill because it's more of a broken game. Borderlands 2, best first-person shooter action RPG, and you can fight me on that. And Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Metroidvania is tight, but I've just talked about 4 games that don't really have anything to do with each other except they're RPGs, but they are vastly different. Now you understand the breakdown of an RPG and you can put together what is and isn't an RPG. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I hope you leave a like and a comment, hit the bell. It would be super swell, you know.